Mr. Phillips, good day.
Well, good day. And your name is again?
Dion.
Dion. It's
Yes.
pronounced Dion.
Yes.
Dion.
Yes,
but
sir.
it's pronounced Dion, not Dion.
Dion, yes.
Dion. Very good.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you get your love of art from?
Love of art. Perhaps I should say that that when I became chairman of the Bermuda National Gallery, one of my school friends says that I was the most unlikely person in the world to be having such a significant position in the art world. And why? Because I was perhaps the worst art student at the Berkeley Institute. We had one of the finest teachers that this country has ever produced, Charles Lloyd Tucker, who was our art teacher at the time. And so I was the worst person in the class. Until I began to think about the role of various people in relationship to art. And there are artists, but artists cannot survive without people to buy art.
Very true.
And people who appreciate art.
That's very true.
So I began to think about my role and my relationship with art. And it was really a sense of how do I demonstrate my appreciation for other people who have art. In fact, I now have, I suspect, one of the larger collections of Charles Lloyd Tucker paintings. I have a room in my house that is dedicated to just Charles Lloyd Tucker paintings. And so when I retired as a civil servant many years ago now, I was invited to join the board here at the Bermuda National Gallery. And I was excited about that opportunity because it gave me an opportunity to understand a little bit more about the dynamics and about the sense of responsibility that artists have in telling a story, and the amount of energy it takes for them to sort of go inside themselves and to express themselves and to put it out there for everyone to see and to be criticized in the positive sense, that is, to have a critique of their work. And I extended that to other art forms in my life, because I'm more on the musical side. I used to sing in a choir, not solo, but in a choir.
I also used to act. I've done my research. You proclaim to be an avid lover of the theater.
Yeah, well, and that was many years ago from my days at the Berkeley Institute. And so my life as a civil servant has run parallel with my interest in all art forms. I have studied directing, I studied theater, and I've performed in theatrical productions. I've done some directing, producing, and so forth. So yes, my interest in art is very eclectic.
Yeah. And I went back and I watched your interview with Kian that you did some years ago for Black History Month. And one of the parts in it that really stuck out to me was your love for language, which in its own right is an art form. So talk to me about your love of language, specifically French, because I want to hear more about France.
Language is communication, and it's the verbal form of communication. And one of the things that I find that makes me want to cringe is how people use language. And I think we've moved too far away from how we express ourselves and how we communicate with each other. That is in writing as well. At one point, I really thought that I would start a side career of writing obituaries.
Okay.
Because it really does disturb me that someone who has lived a full and beautiful life should have such a poor obituary notice. In fact, I've been invited by several persons whose deceased relative or friend I didn't even know, but they've asked me to write their obituaries, which I find very fascinating and interesting to do. So and at the Berkeley Institute, I guess I wasn't as good as others were in the sciences or in mathematics, but I was very, very keen on language. Had some wonderful fine teachers, Dr. Marion Robinson, to name one. But I was also interested in Latin at Edwina Smith. So I was always interested in the dynamics and how one uses language, the origins of language. And I went on to study at university level in France, and in particular linguistics, which is the science of languages.
Yeah.
So whilst I'm mono, or I suppose I could say I'm monolingual in terms of foreign language, I've studied how languages have evolved over time and how they change.
Yeah.
And sensitive to the Académie Française, for example, the French Academy, which is looking at languages all the time and deciding what words, what expressions go into the academy and what are acceptable forms of language that should be in current usage. But that all started out with my interest in French as the only spoken language that was taught at the Berkeley. We did spoken foreign language, that is. We did teach Latin, but no one was around teaching Latin at the time, or speaking Latin.
So was that more of a study of the language itself rather than learning how to speak it, if that makes sense?
Not really. I mean, it's a language. I mean, most of the languages, the Romance languages, have their roots in Latin, and also many of the words that we use every single day in English have their roots in Latin. So it was a foundational linguistics exercise for me. And French was more of a huge expression. How do you express yourself in a foreign language? And so, at the first opportunity that I had this dream, and I don't know how old, but certainly when I left the Berkeley Institute at the age of having finished the Cambridge School certificate, I made up my mind that no matter what I did with the rest of my life, I was going to be working to earn enough money to spend at least 1 year of my life in Paris, the first opportunity I had. So I went to the post office to work for a while, and actually for 2 years after high school, and finally saved up enough money, what I thought was going to be enough to last me 1 year. And so I spent that 1 year really perfecting my French. And whilst I met a lot of other students, foreign students, who were in Paris to have fun, if you will, and enjoy themselves. For me, it was much more than that. It was deep. I wanted to be the best French speaker. I wanted to speak French so much that no one would be able to recognize that I was not French. And I wanted them to ask the question, but where are you from, did you say? You know?
Yes. So, the way you speak about your love of French, you say that you're not an artist, but that's what we do as artists. We engross ourselves in cultures, and whether our own or somewhere foreign, to broaden our horizons and what we see of the world. So I'm pretty sure you can call yourself an artist. And your art form is just language.
No, I don't deny that I'm an artist of sorts, but unfortunately most people, when they think of art, they think of the visual arts and so forth. But I see it in its broadest sense, and my knowledge of and my keen interest in France and in French allowed me to explore other aspects of my own life. And so I spent almost 7 years, having gone there for 1 year. Thankfully I had a return ticket, to Bermuda, and I was finishing my last year, finishing that 1 year that I had in my mind that I was going to be doing, and some friends of mine decided that they wanted to go to Greece, and I said, well, I don't have any money, and then I remembered I had my return ticket. So I went to the Champs-Élysées, the big avenue in Paris, and I cashed in my return ticket and went off to France, and then went off to Italy, to Greece with my friends, and then came back to Paris and bummed around Paris for a while, and the rest is history. I ended up being serious about why I was there, and how I could dive even deeper into French and French culture and French music and all the rest of it.
That story really resonates with me, because that's something that I would do. I would jump ship and figure out once I'm in the water what to do once I'm there. I know how to swim, so I can figure out how to get back to the ship or get to the next one.
Exactly.
With your exploration of life and what you wanted to do, how did you end up also becoming the chairman of the board at a telecom company in One Communication?
My life has been one of seizing opportunities, never missing an opportunity to expand, to grow. And I was fortunate enough to qualify as a teacher. That led me to teaching at the Berkeley Institute, my alma mater, and then I left there to join the Postal Service. So what is the connectivity between the Postal Service and teaching? But at the time, they had created a post of operations manager with responsibility for training, and as part of that process, so that's the teaching connection. Mm-hmm. But also the French connection was that most people don't know this. But the Post Office, the Postal Union, is a specialized agency of the United Nations, and the language of communication of the Post Office, the Universal Postal Union, is French. And so all of the official documents of the Universal Postal Union are written in French first, and then translated into all the other languages. So that was the connection with French, taking my French and teaching skills and experiences into the post office. That led to my becoming director of tourism. Well, I think that speaks for itself. And when I retired from the civil service, I was invited by David White, who was the then chairman of the Bermuda National Gallery, and I came in, as a trustee. And eventually, I was invited by the rest of the trustees to take on the chairmanship. At the same time, what was then BTC, Bermuda Telephone Company, the chairman then, Dr. King, invited me to join the board. And of course, not unlike yourself, why me? Why me? Because I know nothing about telecommunications. Certainly I knew a lot less than I know now. But then there are other aspects of every organization, and one of the things that I was particularly interested in is development, how people develop in their skills. And I always said that a budget is a statement of policy, and if you don't have a line item in your budget that speaks to staff development, then there's something wrong with that organization. So I spent a lot of time during my early years on the board of then BTC, looking at what we could be doing to help people to grow, esprit de corps, getting people to understand their role in the organization, and created a byproduct, a budget which clearly reflected that we appreciated the staff and that they were indeed, we flippantly say or lightly say sometimes, the staff, they're my greatest asset. because they are the front line. But if that's not reflected in the budget, then you've got something a little bit askew. And I eventually, I think it was 13 years ago, became the chairman. Invited by the other directors to become chairman.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong. Your teaching spirit hasn't left you yet. Clearly, you're still pushing for the development of the community, whether it be telecommunications, artists.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how one can divorce oneself from teaching. We are all teachers in some respect, directly. And just by virtue of the example that you present, you are a teacher, because and you never know who's looking at you and for what reason they're looking at you. Yourself, for example, people are watching and seeing what you're doing, because you are a teacher, you're a communicator, and the communicators are teachers.
Yeah, I think that's why I also resonated with your story so much, because you tell stories in a way that's different from myself, but at the end of the day, we both love to tell stories, we love to teach and help people realize that the world is larger than it is in whichever way. And the part that, to call back to Kian's interview, the part that really spoke out to me was how your love of theater and French has shaped the way you went into how you taught your students when you returned. So can you talk to me about that, like your approach to teaching the younger generation?
We have, I always believed in experiential teaching. I never saw myself as on a stage looking down at my students. I always was at their level in terms of communication and allowing them to express themselves. So it was never this sort of dictatorial methodology of teaching. It was always much more collaborative. And also from a practical point of view, I believe in the practical side, and so I would always do quite unusual things with my students. I would take them on field trips, for example. Take them for a walk on the beach, or take them up in the forest, up in Ridgeway property, which is now the old Berkeley, which is not the new Berkeley, I should say. The new. There was a large field up there, and I would take them up there, and we would sit there, and we would speak French for the entire time, and they would try to speak French at the time, and many of them were very good. The one thing that I know that I was successful at, I taught them at least a couple of words, because I don't know anyone, even though I didn't teach them, I don't know anyone at the Berkeley Institute then, who are adults now, I don't know any one of them that does not speak to me in French. At least 3 or 4 words they utter whenever they see me coming, because I made sure that I was synonymous with not just the language, but the culture and the food. And
so your love of teaching, language, theater, arts in general, is there anything that you would say to myself or even the younger generation of artists who look to people as yourself? Because every time I've run into you, I've seen anything of an interview or anything that you said, I've always been inspired, because here's this person, because we're both from the same area of the island, and there's things that we see in those areas that may not be the best example, but you are very clearly the example that people look to of, hey, I come from that area, if he can do it, so can I.
Yeah.
What is a message you would like to share?
The message has got to be one that mediocrity should never exist in your lexicon, should never exist in your language. You have to always be the best. There's nothing wrong with being an elite. There's nothing wrong with elitism. There's nothing wrong with being perfect. There's nothing wrong with striving for perfection, I should say. With not one of us is perfect. At every level, a child who is extremely bright, if you want to use that word, if that child is not encouraged and is not pushed beyond where he is, then he'll soon lose interest.
Yeah.
he soon loses interest.
Yeah, he or she settles into a state of just being, rather than always trying to push for that next goal, push for that next level of greatness that they can achieve. Yeah, 100%.
And part of that process is validation.
Yeah.
And so when I say that I'm not a practicing visual artist, I believe that we should be validating people who are doing work, which is one of the reasons that we have such a wonderful, vibrant program here at the Bermuda National Gallery to encourage young people, to show them how art is a part of their everyday existence, and is not just about visual arts. It's about poetry. It's about music and all the rest of that. So perfection, striving to be perfect, striving to be better than you were the day before. What did I do? What can I do today that makes me a better person? Because by being a better person, you're a better teacher, you're a better example to someone else who's around you. Because people are looking at you, no matter whether you like it or not, people are looking at you all the time. But the other thing is trying. I said earlier that my purpose was to demonstrate that I applaud artists. And I believe that organizations on the island should learn how to, or could do a lot more to encourage the art world. And so my role, as chairman of ONE Communication, is also to try and support the art world, support Bermuda's culture. And so in our giving policy, we like to be able to show where our tentacles can be all over the place. And we happen to be sitting in this particular room with the wonderful Bermuda Wonderland by Elizabeth Mulderick. And I'm so glad that the executive director and the staff here took this artwork and taken it just one step further into the communications. And as you can see, the QR codes, and I'm proud of the fact that as chairman of Bermuda National, as chairman of ONE Communications, that we're able to demonstrate to them that they can play a role in this exhibition as well. And so we've beefed up the internet quality and the broadband and so forth, and also make it far more interactive and so therefore much more reachable and accessible to a broader audience.
Yeah, 100%. Especially the room on the inside there, where you can see every stage of the piece being created. Absolutely. In a way that allows children to go, oh, it's not always. It doesn't start perfect. You have to get to this point of it being this beautiful work of art.
Yeah. We often see the finished product.
Exactly. You don't ever get to see how the person gets it. Yeah, I feel like that really resonates. I can only imagine what young children see, especially when they walk in and they see the smaller,
absolutely,
the smaller little
small archway there. Absolutely, absolutely. But even some of the major classical pieces of art, now that with technology we've been able to sort of scan, for want of a better word, a piece of art, and what you can see behind the behind the finished piece, you see the DNA, if you will. You see how the art has evolved. You can see the colors, you can see the pictures. Maybe the person wasn't quite right, and he's shaped it in a different sort of way, looking at things differently. So yes, I believe that the business community has as much a role to play in the development of art and helping young people to understand and appreciate themselves and also to the broader community.
Thank you so much for your time. This is a great conversation. I'm pretty sure we'll have another.
Thank you. Pleasure.